Dr. Bernard Lafayette, the president of American Baptist College, and the topic is nonviolent leadership for the 21st century, dealing primarily with what Dr. Lafayette has described as principles for nonviolence. And of course, Dr. Lafayette, before we had our first break, you were talking about what you consider to be the 6 basic principles for a prescription for nonviolence. And I think you had already dealt with one of those principles, being courage. And I think now if we will take the rest of this period, the rest of this segment, to talk about those other 5 basic principles that will tie all of this together.
The next principle has to do with the goal that you're trying to accomplish, and that is the beloved community, as Martin Luther King describes it. And the beloved community is a community where people are embraced by love and concern and goodwill for each other as persons. And it's an environment where we respect each other, and we realize that we do not exist in a vacuum by ourselves, but we live in community. And that if we're going to get the fullness of life, then we have to also contribute to our community's growth and development. In other words, you can't have a community that's healthy and a community that's contributing to the growth and health of individuals unless we ourselves are concerned about the least of these. So we can't be satisfied with simply the material things in life when other people are undernourished in terms of education, in terms of job opportunities, career opportunities, or just to have opportunity for leisure learning and growth. That when people are suffering, we must also feel that suffering. So the beloved community is concerned about that. That's the second thing. The next thing is that we must realize that we can be violent in spirit internally as well as externally. Some of the wounds that are inflicted internally are wounds that take much longer to heal. Good. As Martin Luther King said, that the scars of segregation will take a long time to heal. And on the mental scars that we put on children, for example, many times we say, well, we're not abusive because we don't physically abuse our children, but when we ignore them, when we don't compliment them and encourage them, and we make them feel less than human beings and not worth very much, this is a psychological internal damage that takes a long time to repair, if ever.
You talk about, let me interrupt you here, Dr. Lafayette, you talk about the scars of segregation. Let's, perhaps some of our members of our audience might not be familiar with segregation as you are describing segregation. Exactly what was segregation and what were some of the scars that you felt were a part of that system?
Well, the system of segregation separated people on the basis of their race, the color of their skin. So there were places where blacks could not go, simply because they were blacks. They had the money, but they could not go to certain hotels. They could not eat at restaurants, lunch counters. And even the restroom facilities had, colored and white, assuming that there was a difference in the human beings. And the implications, strong implications, was that blacks were inferior and whites were superior. Well, some of the scars caused people to feel that they were less than human beings. And so therefore, they went through this entire society feeling they were less than other people. The other tragedy of it, of course, is that whites thought they were superior, and that false notion caused them to become very out of sync with the rest of the world, because the majority of the world is not white. And so therefore, they had persona non grata in terms of arrogance of power simply because of color of their skin. And that was a disservice they did to young white kids growing up. And so they had to come to the sense of reality that they live in a world with other people, and that other people, regardless of their color, are also equal in terms of their distribution of brain power. In fact, Charles Drew was the one that developed the blood plasma that saved a lot of folks' lives. I'm sure more white people benefited from his invention, a way to preserve blood so that the Red Cross could carry blood from one place to another. It was a black man who did that. But many whites, of course, were not aware, or either blacks. So to write black folks out of history was another form of segregation. So we read history and we don't see, even in textbooks today, in high schools and middle schools, we don't see the black contribution. It's there. So therefore, people assume that blacks didn't contribute anything. But those things we have to overcome. So those were some of the scars of segregation, the psychological scars of not feeling worthwhile and not feeling equal. And so the beloved community eradicate all of those sorts of things and make people feel a sense of wholeness and a sense of a vital part of every community. The other thing is that many people feel that when they become angry, they want to attack the individual person. And instead of attacking the individual person, if we let that energy go towards attacking the problem together, then we could be able to make some progress. Because many times when people go back and forth attacking each other, it doesn't result into any solution to the problem. Some people say, well, I feel better. But you feel much better if you can solve the problem rather than get into a fight. Yes. So we also look at the whole issue of reconciliation, that somehow we feel that the arc of the universe is long, the moral arc, but it bends towards justice. And in a sense, we have to recognize that even though we may not be able to see the benefits of our work, that if we work towards peace and nonviolence in our world, our community, then one day we'll realize a better community. Now, we're not talking about a community where there's no conflict. The thing we're talking about is the way we resolve conflict, the way we look at conflict, and a whole method of reconciliation, and how you can use that force of reconciliation to bring about the kind of changes that will be lasting changes and not temporary changes.
You know, Dr. Lafayette, as we approach this second commercial break, I'm reminded that when you talk about violence and nonviolence, and especially when you talk about Dr. King's commitment to that, it's almost as if you're using two other words in reference to that, and that is love and hate, because I think that everything that you said about violence being, nonviolence being able to overcome violence and vice versa, you can also use those same ideas in reference to love and hate. So in reality, what you're talking about is whether there is love in a community or whether there is hate in a community. Would that be a fair characterization of what we're seeing?
Yes, it would be. And I think that the whole concept of love, there are actually more than one word in the Greek language that means love. One is philios, which means brotherly love, that kind of fraternal love that we people have, that's reciprocal. You know, you do for me, I do for you.
Good. And we'll continue this when we come back after this second commercial break.